Welcome to our lunch keynote session called The Big Idea Talks. I'd now like to turn to our final speaker for this session, Karith Foster. You may recognize Karith from Comedy Central or Howard Stern. Maybe this is the first time Howard Stern's name was said in a roundtable event. MSNBC, or even Fox News. One of my favorite pieces of Karith's work, if you've seen it, is the 2015 documentary called Can We Take a Joke?, in which Karith appears alongside of George Carlin and Penn Jillette and other fellow comedians to talk about how humor and free speech have come under attack. Karith's motto is, if you can laugh at it, you can get through it. And she's brought that invaluable lesson to her work in diversity training. Through her groundbreaking InVersity program, Karith is providing an alternative to the traditional DEI. And she is teaching corporations and organizations across the country that, yes, there is a better way to do diversity. Her goal is to take the division out of diversity altogether by focusing on what people have in common, which she is going to tell us about now. Please help me welcome Karith Foster.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you, everyone who made this possible. Thank you to all of you who are here to hear these words. Brandon, amazing. Hannah, amazing. I love being and sharing space with people who want to change the world. Now, I know I was introduced as a comedian, and I appreciate that. I have done some other things in my life. I worked in corporate America for a little while in human resources while I was pursuing stand-up for a Fortune 100 cosmetics company in New York City. I am a luminary at the Knight Hennessy Scholars Program at Stanford University. I have done I've made children, I've procreated, I've gotten married, trying to make the world a better place by raising good people. But I'm curious, I want this to be a conversation. How many of you got excited when you heard that Philanthropy Roundtable was gonna start delving into the diversity conversation? Okay, like 20 of you. That's okay. You know what? If you were hesitant because of how the diversity conversation's been going, I don't blame you, right? 200 years ago, we were dealing with the wild, wild west. Now we are dealing with the wild, wild woke. And the idea is not to be woke, but to be awake, to be aware, to be conscious of what's happening in the world around us, and especially what's happening in the diversity and inclusion conversation. And I may say some things that may surprise you, they may not. I am of the opinion that diversity has been hijacked. I think that true diversity is a wonderful thing. We know having a diverse environment means new ideas, experiences from multiple people who make something better. Unfortunately, when we talk about having conversations around diversity in corporate America and in our schools, we are looking at what's actually furthering the divide, what's causing more polarization, focusing on just one aspect of who we are, be that our ethnicity, our sexuality, our gender, and that's insulting, and it's unfortunate. And what makes it even more unfortunate is that it's very intentional by some people. What makes it even more unfortunate is that for the people who their hearts and their minds are in the right place, they don't realize that they are contributing to an effort that's actually tearing us apart further. They want to do the right thing. They want to be good people. They know that it's important to celebrate who we are, but the approach is what needs a reassessment. And so because of that, my work with Don Imus, I don't know if you're familiar with Don Imus, he's no longer with us, but I was called in to meet with him after the Rutgers debacle. Do you remember that? When Don Imus called the Rutgers women's basketball team nappy-headed hoes. I refer to that as Nappygate. I got the call saying, hey, Karith, you interested in a radio TV opportunity? Of course. Oh, by the way, it's with Don Imus. Are you serious? He wants you to have a national dialogue about race and racism in America. And I remember thinking when I got that call, oh my goodness, I'm being asked to join forces with one of the most reviled men in media right now. How am I going to do this? But I also remember thinking, if I don't do this, someone else may take this position and not be as responsible. And I wanted to have a dialogue that was healthy. I wanted to have a dialogue where people weren't put on the offense or the defense. I wanted it to be a thoughtful conversation that everyone was included in. And the more that I delved into how we talk about diversity in the workplace, how we talk about diversity within the school system, I realized even the word diversity, the prefix has divide, division. And we're shocked that it's not working. And what most people want to say and do is, well, we need more diversity. That's why 70 years of doing this, it hasn't been working. We're actually further worse off than we were. What do we need? More diversity. Well, not if you're doing it wrong. It's like yelling louder at a deaf person. We need to change the approach. And that's when I realized it's so easy. It's so simple. Why have we not been doing? Let's instead of focusing on what separates and divides us, let's focus on what we have in common, how we can be truly inclusive of one another, but most importantly and most powerfully, teaching people how to be introspective, to understand their value and their worth, their connection to humanity, so they can see it in someone else. Right? We can still celebrate all the aspects of diversity, all the things that are part of our identity, our background, our heritage. Expand the idea of diversity to include diversity of thought and ideas, viewpoint diversity, right? But bring personal responsibility into the conversation. You know, so I wrote a book called You Can Be Perfect or You Can Be Happy. Spoiler alert, there's no such thing as perfection. But happiness is a choice. It may not be a constant, but it's a choice. And some people have mistaken my book for being a self-help book. It's not. It's a book about personal responsibility. It's a book about owning your greatness. It's a book about understanding that if you exist, you have purpose, divinely given purpose. And so the idea is to teach people that, so that they respect themselves, they understand their value, so they can see it in someone else. And my approach is using humor, of course, but it's teaching people how to care. And that word care has been used several times, actually, even this morning. But for me, it's an acronym that stands for having conscious empathy, not to be confused with sympathy. Oh, that's too bad, what a shame, right? It's empathy on steroids, where you ask at least two questions. What is it like for them and how might that feel? Active listening. Most people do not know how to have real, effective conversations anymore. Every single one of us has been in a situation where we're trying to speak and we know the other person just can't wait to butt in to get their 2 cents in. Now, we've also been that person, but active listening is doing this, giving someone eye contact, asking questions, being curious. You know, I hate that in so many conversations around diversity that, well, you can't ask that question. You can't say that. This cancel culture, that's absolute nonsense, needs to be obliterated. We should be curious about one another. We can be curious and we can be courteous. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And when we become indifferent to one another, that's the downfall of society. So we have to actively listen. That's the one thing that not one thing, I've got many things from doing stand-up over the last 25 years. Yes, I started when I was 5. But to work and be with audiences from Washington State to Washington, D.C., and even globally, you get to, I mean, the number one rule in comedy is be funny, but it's also know your audience. And in order to know your audience, you have to be able to see who they are and where they're coming from. And that is so critical. But that has given me skills as a master communicator that a lot of people don't have, but I get to impart those skills when I go in and I teach people how to care, right? How to have that conscious empathy, the active listening. And after that comes responsible reactions. It is so easy to want to be on the defense when someone says something to you, or the offense, because this is a very personal conversation, diversity and inclusion, right? Because it's about who we are and how we show up. And if we feel that we're under fire for something, many times things that we can't control, like the color of our skin, how we were born, who we were born to, where we were born, right? It can be very uncomfortable. Just as it can be uncomfortable hearing something and a view that you don't agree with. But invoking responsible reactions means being able to have a conversation with someone that you don't agree with, but you still respect them as a fellow human being. You still understand that just because we don't see eye to eye on something doesn't mean we can't work together. We can't make a business better. We can't complete a project. The E in caring stands for environmental awareness, right? I get it. Birds of a feather flock together. It's not just an expression because it's cute and it rhymes. We like to be comfortable. We gravitate toward what we know. But if we're going to be very honest about having true diversity in our worlds, we have to step out of that comfort zone a little bit sometimes and engage with people who we don't see eye to eye on all the time. Now, I know that most of the people in this audience understand this. What's interesting is that the champions of diversity right now are actually the proponents of not listening, right? Isn't that ironic? Of shutting people down. And I feel that when people do understand that we can have conversations around diversity and inclusion and have them be healthy and thoughtful and truly inclusive, that's when we get the opportunity to make some progress and not leave anyone out of the conversation. So let me ask you this. How many people in this room were in New York City during 9/11? A lot of you. Obviously not everybody was, but we all know what happened that day. I was in Manhattan that day. And that Tuesday lasted forever. And that's when you realize Manhattan really was an island. Like if you did not have a helicopter to get off, you were stuck because the tunnels were closed, the bridges were shut down, and it was terrifying. And that Wednesday, we just stayed holed up in our apartments. But that Thursday, some friends of mine and I decided to meet at the Jacob Javits Center because they were asking for volunteers. Well, I showed up at the Jacob Javits Center and saw something I will never, ever forget. The size of this room, right, the width of this room for people lined up for blocks on 11th Avenue and 42nd Street. And it was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen because it was people there to volunteer, people there to give blood, people with water, with food, with tools, to do anything that they could to help their fellow human beings. And in that moment, I experienced something I'd never experienced before. There was no color, there was no ethnicity, there was no religion, there was no age, there was no politics, there was no sexuality. It was human beings there to help other human beings. So I know it's possible because I witnessed it. And it shouldn't have to take a national tragedy or a natural disaster to be in that space. What it takes is teaching people how to care. And when you can get that conscious empathy, the active listening, responsible reactions, and environmental awareness of adversity, you get more caring. You get communication, acceptance, respect, engagement. I'm here to be part of the solution. And it's not even me, like I'm just a vessel for this work, I'll be honest. But I love that I get to take this messaging and see people leave a conversation about diversity and inclusion, not feeling guilty, not going home to self-flagellate, but feeling inspired and connected. That's how we're supposed to be having these conversations. And that's what adversity can do. So I thank you so much for your presence. I thank you for your time. And I thank you for being messengers in this world of adversity. Thank you very much.